Late last month, on a Sunday afternoon, just after my last sermon here for you, in fact, actually it wasn't here, I guess, at home, I took a long walk in the Don Valley, as I often do. I was pleased to see that my favorite rocks were clear of both water and other people. These are the rocks where I like to sit and pray. That is, where I like to sit and let go of my words and my thoughts for a while and simply open up to the presence alongside the rushing water. No sooner had I sat down that day when I noticed a furious thrashing about in the rapids just slightly downriver. In this spot, the spot where I was sitting, the river descends significantly, changing from a calm and still river to my right to a stretch of rolling whitecaps to my left. Usually, watching the waves is drama enough, but on this day, something was different. The thrashing I saw was clearly a fish. And then I remembered that Alan Brand had told me about watching the salmon in the Humber River a few weeks earlier. Could the salmon also be running now in the dawn? Well, clearly they were, because as I continued to gaze at the churning water, every so often I would see a rogue splash rise up that didn't fit the regular pattern of waves. And from time to time, I'd see the dark profile of a muscular fish making its way improbably forward, swimming against the current. It seemed completely impossible. The furious splashes I saw here and there in the rolling water were many meters downstream of the concrete step up just to the north. How could any salmon possibly make its way up and up, swimming against the rapids, to somehow ascend to that calmer and higher altitude? As I sat there for perhaps a half hour, I saw the occasional fish making only incremental progress. It seemed like a truly lost cause. And then, just as I stood to leave, I caught sight of a particularly breathtaking movement forward. A salmon was furiously gaining ground, like a linebacker miraculously gaining yardage. My heart leaped in my chest, and I couldn't help but whisper, "Go, go, go!" Though of course the salmon couldn't hear me. I wanted to cheer it on. I knew that it was unlikely that it could possibly reach the finish, but I cheered it on just the same. I couldn't tell which particular fish moved forward and which one slipped back. The breaches of the water's surface were unpredictable and non-sequential. But then, just when I thought, I really do need to be heading home now, I finally did see one salmon leap above the water and over the barrier that separated the calm upper river from the rapids below. Against all odds, it had made it. And then it slipped below the surface again of the dark water to continue its journey toward its spawning grounds. Several years ago, I remember watching an environmentalist speak on some YouTube video. I don't remember the name, her name, or the specific subject of her talk, but I remember her saying that if anyone watching was a writer, that they should stop writing about anything else and write about the climate crisis. Just the planet. It made an impression on me at the time, and part of me wanted to follow her advice and her example. And yet I didn't. I proceeded to write lots of other things, songs on a variety of subjects, and eventually sermons on one thing or another. All of them worthwhile enough, I hope, meaningful or inspiring in some way. Try as I might, I couldn't seem to find the pure and singular focus that she said was so urgently necessary. The pure and singular focus, not unlike the salmon I watched swimming upstream that Sunday afternoon. Whatever it is in the salmon's DNA that compels it to push itself against the force of a river to ensure its own survival, I hope and pray that our human species may find it too. A few weeks ago, Sean shared an insight about ministry with all of you when he said that most ministers have just one or two sermons that we preach over and over. His, he revealed, is, "This is it. This is the one life we have, short and not always sweet." These are Sean's words. "We are companions on the journey, and we would do well to try to love one another while we have the chance." Hearing this, two thoughts went through my mind. First of all, wow, that's one heck of a good one sermon. And second, I hope nobody asks me what my one sermon is, because I have no idea. Thinking about it the next day, though, I realized that while I might not be able to boil them down to one or two, I probably do have Lynn's greatest hits. In the spirit of collegial balance, I feel it's only fair to share them with you now. So here they are. You are enough. Do what you can. We can get through this difficult time. A lot of wise people know a whole lot more about this than me. Let me introduce them to you. Slow down. We are fully and deeply intertwined. There are deep sources of strength we can turn to. And finally, each of us is a precious and sacred part of something far more vast, mysterious, and meaningful than we can fully understand. Welcome. Truly, as I read this list to you, I think that that pretty much sums up my core message in sermons as well as songs. So I guess you're free to go. But I guess I have a few more minutes, so I might as well keep talking. When I think about the climate crisis, I see that all of these possible sermons can be applied to it. So perhaps they are my way of writing about this one thing. Another interesting feature about ministry and creative expression is that we are always writing to ourselves, trying to open up a channel for deeper intelligence to flow through us that may then guide us toward right action that can be most beneficial to the whole. Whether we take that action or not often has to do with our willfulness as human beings, our desire to control the outcome and gain the most we can for ourselves, rather than giving ourselves over willingly to the larger process of life that calls us toward love, healing, and wholeness. That is to say, whether or not we can or will devote ourselves to love. In a new book called The Psychological Roots of the Climate Crisis, author Sally Weintraub says that when it comes to this emergency, it is not about which group holds power, but which part of the mind. Is care or uncare in overall charge? Saying that all of us are in a kind of tug of war between the aspects of ourselves that might heal the planet and the ones that might destroy it, she writes, "The uncaring part wants freedom to be self-centered and greedy, while the other part wants freedom to consider others as well as self. Having radically different conceptions of freedom and opposing ethics, values, and framing things, how do both parts reconcile, settle their differences, and live together in the same mind? How does one part of ourselves say no to the other part for the well-being of all people and life on this planet? Although she frames the dilemma as a psychological one, I would describe it instead as spiritual. In 2013, the forestry scientist Gus Speth put it well when he said, "I used to think the top global environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address those problems, but I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation, and we scientists don't know how to do that." Inner conflict and discomfort are necessary parts of spiritual growth. So if we find ourselves experiencing those, we may be on the right track. To quote again from Sally Weintraub, "The starting point for building a more caring society is never forgetting that care and uncare are inherent parts of us all, and that each seeks expression and dominance over the other. When the uncaring part becomes a serious threat to life, it is imperative that the caring part reins in uncare. That struggle is ongoing. Because of this, care needs robust frameworks in place and a culture of care and support to protect them." It seems to me that is what we are doing in our own small and perhaps imperfect way, as Unitarians try to write principles that will structure our behavior and guide us toward a more caring way of being as a group. It is important to remember also that the heating of the planet is causing disproportionate suffering for the global poor, for Indigenous, Black, and other people of color, and for people of all marginalized identities. In what has been called slow violence, wealthy countries, such as Canada, hold outsized responsibility for this suffering. And as a result, the rapid spiritual growth and practical changes that must take place must happen here and now. A significant challenge, of course, is that it is easy for us to get caught in disagreements about what kind of care is most needed, which expression of care is most correct or important. The recent climate rally at Queen's Park on November 6th was led by a coalition of leaders with several areas of specific focus. Labor leaders stood next to educators, next to faith groups, as well as organizers for particular branches of racial justice and social justice, all recognizing that the issues that they represent are deeply intersectional, and each one contributes to the health and healing of the whole. Many of us were there that day. There were Indigenous, Black, people of color, and white people, all leading side by side, as well as people of many ages, orientations, and abilities. One of the most inspiring speeches came from the Indigenous activist Schuyler Williams. Along with singer-songwriter Logan Statz, he was on his way to join the forest defenders in BC the next day. In the following days, according to a CBC report, Schuyler Williams was among the group of protesters arrested as they defended the Wet'suwet'en River against the proposed Coastal GasLink pipeline. The river is described by local Indigenous people as essential to their livelihood, and it is also a place where salmon spawn. In his speech at Queen's Park, Schuyler Williams pointed out that nobody can be harder on the left than the left. Nobody can be harder on the left than the left. And that progressive people fighting against each other are one of the greatest threats to planetary healing. The answer, of course, to this dilemma is not for either side to convince the other that we or they are correct, but instead that we come to learn, as Einstein said, to widen the circle of concern until it includes all beings, to welcome each other as we are, to open our hearts to one another in kindness and respect. That is, to love one another. Which brings me back to Sean's sermon. Kindness, compassionate listening, non-judgmental, loving presence. These are the ways of healing rather than harm. This is the way to stick together rather than push one another away. The capacity to do this, to love rather than judge and reject, well, this is a capacity that each of us has to develop and that we have to renew constantly. Because the temptation to slip into uncare will always be a temptation. As the poet Rilke said, it is good to love because love is difficult. And that is exactly what we must do. We must love the world. Come to think of it, that is a sermon I'd like to deliver more often, both to you and to myself. Love the world. Love the world in both the receiving way of taking in and appreciating its deep meaning and beauty, despite the enormity of all that is wrong, and in the active way of loving fiercely, of insisting on caring for what we love so deeply. Love the world. I admit to you that all too often, this essential message, which is, I believe, a deeply religious message, slips from the forefront of my mind. It can slip countless times a day. So I need the reminder of spiritual teachers who say, please come home for the love of earth. I need the reminder to return again to the home of my soul, which is love and only love. And I need the example of the salmon in their fierce determination to survive and to fulfill their purpose in living. Yes, there are many times when I drift from this homing instinct and I need to be brought back. And yet, the insistent call to love the world is always with me, always present, as it is in every moment for each and every one of you. It is here, in the place where we are, with the tools that we have, that we can do this work, and we can do this work together. In the ancient words from the Jewish holy text, the Talmud, do justly now, love mercy now, walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. It is in these small acts of justice that each of us can do now that we can and will find in ourselves, the ability to not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. It is a meaningful paradox that in these small, humble acts of love, perhaps only in these small and humble acts, we will find the capacity to care for the enormity. The night after I watched the salmon, I phoned a close friend who works as a hospital chaplain. Vicki has worked in the intensive care unit at Toronto General Hospital throughout the COVID pandemic. Recalling our time together at seminary and speaking from her own religious perspective, She offered a theological lens on the salmon story. I often think that God's will for me is ease and comfort, she said. I think that God wants me to be peaceful and at rest, yet maybe also I am called to do that thing which is extremely difficult in order for me to get to that place. Maybe it's not wrong that I am in the struggle. Maybe this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, swimming against the current like the salmon. Bless you all in your journeys toward love, toward justice, and toward the healing of this earth. Amen.